We're about ready to get started. I am Jeffrey McLaughlin. I'm the SVP of Services and Solutions at Radiant Digital. Thanks for joining our panel discussion today. I'm delighted to welcome you to a discussion on building trust in government through customer experience transformation. And we're privileged to have four distinguished panelists joining us today. We have Abna Apau, who's the Acting Customer Experience Division Director and FPAC Customer Experience Officer at the U.S. Department of Agriculture. We have Pavan Pitigu, who's the Chief Technology Officer at FMCSA, the U.S. Department of Transportation. Mick McGuire, who's a Communications and Customer Experience Analyst at the Postal Regulatory Commission. And Victor Udoewa, who's the Service Design Lead at CDC and notably formerly with 18F. So I want to quickly lay the groundwork for our discussion. CX is a broad and often ill-defined term, and it can get even more confusing when used in the context of government. So in the private sector, the canonical definition of customer experience is that it encompasses all touch points and interactions between a brand and a customer. It includes online and offline experiences, customer service, product quality, and more. And delivering great CX involves understanding and meeting customer needs and expectations, anticipating their preferences, and providing seamless, personalized, and consistent experiences across all channels. So we may have trouble defining CX, but we all know it when we see it. So what does that mean in the context of government? We're constituents, we're the public, we're not customers. We've already paid for the product. So we want government to function in an efficient and accountable way. And frankly, our expectations are very high because we see the art of the possible in the commercial world. So CX practitioners in government that are thinking about these issues have reason to be encouraged. In late 2021, the White House issued the executive order on transforming federal customer experience and service delivery to rebuild trust in government. This order outlined specific goals, strategies, and tactics to reorient agencies towards improving services and to reduce the time taxes levied by antiquated, inefficient processes and technology. More recently, the Government Service Delivery Improvement Act was introduced in Congress, which, if passed, would further formalize customer experience as a priority in government. In this panel, we'll explore four themes related to CX in government. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to the panel for opening thoughts. Abna, take it away.
Okay, hi everyone. I'm Abna Apau, very excited to be here. Is there a bit of an echo? I'll push this away a little bit. All right, can you still hear me? Okay. So very glad to be here, and I'm excited about a lot of the work we're doing in USDA, specifically in the Farm Production and Conservation Mission area. Our office was created in 2018, and when I came to USDA FPAC in 2019, we really had to build the program from the ground up. And so as of today, I'm really proud of the fact that we do have a program people know about now. We don't get a lot of blinking eyes anymore when we show up in the room. And even more so, it feels like our program agencies are two high-impact service providers. They've really taken on the work of customer experience, especially because they see the opportunity to be able to do big things that they've tried to do for a long time but hit a lot of roadblocks in. So glad to be here.
Thank you, Abna. Pavan?
Thank you. Again, my pleasure to be here this morning. I come from a retail background. Before joining the Transportation Department and the Motor Carrier Safety Administration, I spent more than 15 years in retail, working through lots of omni-channel integrations, mobile commerce, e-commerce, etc., where you don't actually think customer experience is a foreign concept and that you actually have to have that. It starts from knowing your customer and building digital assets around the customer needs. It's no longer about what business needs are. It's about customer needs and centering the solutions around that. So coming from that background, you know, it was a shocker to actually learn that there was no thought of that customer journey in the systems or solutions that we had developed. Again, for right or wrong reasons, there were certain decisions made in the past which worked at the time, but we had stopped there. We had not evolved from that point. So at least now, for the last 2.5 years in the agency, we have continued to evolve, putting the customer first, whether they are like, the citizens that interact with the DOT, FMCSA, or the actual workforce that work within our own divisions or our partners' divisions that use these digital assets. So user experience and customer experience combined into the journey was embedded as the get-go. So every time we now have a business user or our program people come in and say, hey, we have this issue, they actually are tuned to think from, okay, this is a problem for the scenario and are talking the journey overall. So we have a long ways to go, but it's a great start.
Fantastic. Nick?
All right. I'm going to make sure everyone can hear me here. We're sharing one microphone, so. Yes. So, it's a pleasure to be here. So I've been at the Postal Regulatory Commission now for over 4 years. I was invited to join the staff of then Commissioner Michael Kubianda. He is now Chairman Kubianda, and he found me because he didn't find me. We've been friends for a long time. And we took very, very divergent paths in our careers. And he has an extensive experience in the Postal Service where I haven't. And I edited some questionnaires for him when he was going through his confirmation process. He really loved my edits and said, you know what, you've run a business, you've been a constituent, you have a ton of customer-facing experience, and your most recent job was in CX, working for a software company focused on POS software systems for fast casual restaurants. That individual thing was a very, very unique perspective he thought to bring to the commission. And so that's how I went from a sommelier actor to CX analyst at a federal agency for a presidential appointee. I don't know. I mean, there's no pathway. There's no set path, I should say, and you just never know where you're going to find yourself. For CX, for me, when he brought me on, it was take the time, learn the industry, look at what the Postal Service is doing. Now, I want to make clear that the Postal Regulatory Commission does not make decisions on what the Postal Service do. Our very, very I would say narrowly defined mission and our purpose is to provide oversight and analysis of the rates and service performance of the Postal Service. At that point, my boss figured, I'd like to look at CX. And I want you to learn about CX. I want you to look at the Postal Service and just, ask, let's formulate some questions. Let's find out how they're doing it. Not to challenge them, not to say they're not doing anything right. We want to know what they're doing and why they're doing it. And in that sense, to me, I saw the regulatory process as a collaborative experience, process, not an adversarial one. So in the last 4 years, we've developed this knowledge base. I've actually had people on the staff side start to take CX courses, get CX certifications. There is a merry band of us now who just kind of, compare, share articles, and prep ourselves throughout the second half of the year for the first half of the year, which is always the regulatory process that we do. We put two reports together. One is the annual compliance determination. The other one is a performance review and performance plan from the previous fiscal year. So that, and the second one, the performance line, that's where you're going to find more of our CX analysis. But by and large, we ourselves don't have much because we're a small regulatory agency. We don't really have a real need for a real robust CX plan. So my position really is more as an analyst, more as an observer, and reporting back to staff, just certain findings, and also just investigating it writ large, current CX trends. So, but from that vantage point, it's been interesting, and the last few years in the postal world has been a very interesting time, and I think people have saw the value of the Postal Service maybe more than ever in various points in the last few years, and it's been really just very exciting to kind of watch everything that's unfolding right now. So, but obviously, I do need to say anything I say about the Postal Service is not representative of the Postal Regulatory Commission nor Chairman Kubayanda. Those are my opinions. I had to put that disclaimer out there. I think you all understand. So, but that's pretty much it for the beginning. I have some other thoughts, but we'll get to those.
Thanks, Mick. Victor?
Hi, my name is Victor. I'm a service designer at the CDC. I'll just mention two things. This is the fifth agency that I've been in, and when I first came into the federal government in 2009, I didn't hear any talk about customer experience. And for those of us in technology, we always talked about user experience. And we have UX maturity models that are probably 20 years old, but other fields and industries have had maturity models for a while. And so what we've learned is that, as you go from like not knowing anything about UX to just really embedding it all throughout your org, there's the bottom of another maturity model that starts, which is the CX maturity model. And that's just an indication or recognition of the fact that, at least for me, every single digital product that I have ever worked on in the federal government was always a part of a larger service. And we can do all we can on this product, but it may not be the biggest impact for improving the service. So it's been a really good moment for us to broaden our perspective. The second thing I'll just say is, normally from a design perspective, when we work, we think of a Venn diagram. So a circle representing the needs of the user and a circle representing the needs of the business that you support, that you work in. For us in government, it's the government. So government needs, user needs. And now with the CX mindset, it's customer needs and government needs. And then we look at the intersection, and the intersection tells us, okay, we have all these needs that people have. We'll use the government's needs, their mission, their strategy to direct which needs we meet first of the customer. And that kind of comes, that's been my experience in the private sector. In the public sector, though, I take a different approach and philosophy, and that is specifically because I believe if you live or work in a region or area of the world that aspires to democratic ideals, in which the needs of the people should be the needs of the government of the people, the needs of the people should be the needs of the government by the people. My job isn't to look at the intersection. My job is to actually bring those two in alignment. And the fact that they're not in alignment is why we have to do this kind of customer experience work, because the government is its own entity, middle managers, political appointees, elected officials, individual contributors, senior managers, with all these incentives, and it has these emergent properties that don't always align with the public.
Thanks so much for that perspective, Victor. So let's move on to our first theme. We've touched on this a little bit in the discussion thus far. CX in government is quite different than CX in the private sector. So in your experience, what practices have translated well, what doesn't work, and how have you adapted your practice to the unique requirements of government? Abna?
So I have both public and private experience, and I have to use the word that you used earlier, a little bit of shock coming into the federal government in terms of how things work. So in the private sector, I remember if I needed to get anything done, I focused on the job that I was paid to do, and everybody else did the jobs they were supposed to do. And then we finished what we needed to get done. And coming into the federal government, I realized that you're the one who's supposed to do all the things, right? So if you want to put on a expo, You do all the things. You bring the chairs, the tables, the cloth, everything. And so I think for me, after getting past the shock and realizing that, yes, there's a lot to be done, and also there's some opportunities embedded in that, it helped me realize that while it is easier to implement CX principles in the private sector, many more things are more clearly defined, that in the government, there's an opportunity embedded in that you have to kind of figure all those pieces out together because, just thinking about, and again, my comments are a reflection of me, ABNA, not necessarily USDA or FPAC. One of the things that I've learned is that when building something new or looking at a new program, because of the complex pieces and parts, some political, some non-political, that you have to account for, there are many more mini problems to solve before you get to solving the bigger problem. And while it means that it ultimately will take a lot longer, it means that you can build coalitions along the way that you're going to need at every step. When you look at the fiscal year process, you could say, we're going to get something done at the beginning of the fiscal year. Well, now you've got to figure out the budget pieces, the IT pieces, the human resources pieces. You can do all of those pieces and get to the end of the fiscal year, and now your money vanishes. Now your program is no longer. But if you really build the coalitions and take a long view, ultimately you can achieve much more sustainable growth in CX than if you just try to get it done really, really quickly. One, it's not realistic in the government context anyway. But when you think about constituents and the public at large, the government has a responsibility to ensure that all of the people who can benefit from their services truly get access to their services. And so if you take time and you build your programs more intentionally and you use human-centered design principles to build those coalitions to ensure you're addressing the right problem, it may take you 3 or 4 years, which I know is true of our programs within FPAC. But when you get there, you've got something that's much more long-living than something that's just a trend that comes and goes quickly. So that's my answer.
Thanks, Abna. Pavan?
So for me, the fact that we are okay for having the government sector to be beneath the standards that private sector follows was not acceptable at all. So I challenged my team and myself included, and my peers in the executive roles within the DOT, FMCSA, is why are we okay with that, right? If I'm going to my bank, which is a private organization, I would never be okay having to get a service that anything less than what I expect. But if I have a trucking organization that want to register to be able to operate their business in the US, they should expect the same service levels that they would expect from like a private banking or a hospital or any other entities they interact with, and FMCSA should be no less. So that was the bar that I wanted to say, hey, we should be at least on par, maybe better, in giving that experience for the people that interact with FMCSA on a daily basis. So, again, it's a big, big, big cultural shift, mental shift. Not just top to bottom, but also bottoms up. It has to come in all 360 degrees of that mindset shift. So when we were going through, again, it has to start somewhere. You can't change the entire agency overnight. So we took that as a challenge within the office of the CTO that I have a lot of control over versus the rest of the agency, is we are going to operate, and whatever we build, they should be any less comparable to digital assets that we use in our daily life, right? Like we all use Netflix, we all use Amazon, we all use Google, we all use like a lot of these different brands that we either shop or go for entertainment or for banking purposes. Whatever the experience that we have there, any tech product that we build, it should be no less in comparison to these assets that we use in our personal lives. So my first opportunity to show the agency and our shareholders, I mean stakeholders, and the folks that use was to, my first opportunity was to build a brand new roadside inspection platform for all the law enforcement officers, across all the 50 states. So we have put in all the human-centered design principles, the customer experience concepts, knowing your customer, right? There are some really, really experienced users that they have a definite path of, hey, this is how I'm going to go around the truck. And there are new people like me that are new to inspection, and we need some guidance on what am I actually doing. So we have understood and built the system, whether it can guide you or the system be guided by your own choice of how you want to do the truck inspection. So when we piloted that with very, very bare minimum capability, people were, they all of their eyebrows were lit up and said, hey, when can we get this all capabilities and move on? So in less than 1 year, we actually went from ideation phase to launching with on-par capabilities with the legacy systems. And we're moving almost 16,000 inspectors across the nation, transitioning, and hopefully in the next few months we will be, sunsetting our legacy systems. But when you build that customer satisfaction factor in that journey and build things, it's going to be a pull versus push. Resistance is always there for anything we do. And when you do things that people are going to know their existing pains are removed, then, it will be a pull rather than a push. So to me, I don't think any of us should be allowing government customer experience should be below the norms of what your expectations would be with any of the private industry.
Thanks, Baba. Mick, your perspectives?
Well, from a lot of years in customer-facing roles as I've had, the one thing that jumped out at me when I joined the government was realizing that these agencies don't have competition. By that, what I mean is they're sole source service providers. So if your agency has a mission, performs a service, and that is the only place for those for any constituent citizens that need your service to go to. So at that point, then you're not worried about comparing your experience, thank you, with any competitors. For me, that led me to actually believe that I think what's essential for agencies is employee experience. And by that, what I think, if you think about, I read something recently that 30% of the federal workforce currently right now will be eligible for retirement in 2027. So at that point, you have to start thinking about recruitment, you have to start thinking about retention and engagement with the existing workforce that we have. Then also, you have to invest in some robust training and just, listening to them. Like in UX, there's a thing called a user interview. You as somebody, a CX, maybe, employees are not going to feel comfortable saying, hey, this part of my job, this is not helping me do my job. Actually, it's getting in my way, and they don't want to upset a supervisor or whatnot. So what you want to do maybe is interview their supervisors instead, because they're getting the complaints, and then they can give that back to you. But I think, the goal is not only to do that, but also to identify currently right now among your workforce, who are tomorrow's leaders? Who are the people that you can groom and mentor to take over and be the next generation of leaders going forward? Now, I had a conversation beforehand where we talked about can the government recruit the best people, or Gen Z and millennials? Are they do they see going to work for the government, and in the private sector they can make so much more? All that's true, but I think there's also a unique thing to think about. Like those generations have grown up in times of financial uncertainty. And, a government job that pays well, that has some of the best benefits that you can find anywhere, is actually quite appealing to a lot of them. And also, this generation is also just so well suited for the mission of CX entirely, I think. And because they just seem to have so much, a broader sense of empathy, of collaboration than my generation, which is X, where, if you remember, where our parents kicked us out of the house to don't come back until dinner. And, we were kind of, we were raised to be more self-sufficient, just be on our own. And I think that's actually a really good thing. I think it bodes well for the future. I think it bodes well for government services in the future, that I think there's a workforce coming up that's going to really push the ball forward, if you would, of the mission of any agency that they decide to go to work for. So I'm really encouraged in that aspect. I think the federal workforce is going to be in good shape. I think it is currently now, but I think we do need to, like I said, just getting back to it. It's I think we need to recruit new people. We need to make sure we're retaining our best people, and identifying the leaders of tomorrow.
Thanks, Mick. Victor, I'd love to hear your perspectives on that.
One of the ways it's different in the government is that in the private sector, if you provide a bad service, usually you'll lose revenue. Could be premium model, ad, subscription, fee for service. There isn't that kind of mechanism. Like if I put out a service, it's bad. Guess what? Next year, I still get that tax revenue. There's nothing that kind of forces that kind of movement. So I could say a lot of things to the question. I'll just say one briefly because I know we have other conversations we want to have. One of the things is that for the people that are in my group or that I help to manage, I've moved them to outcomes-based performance plans. So normally what happens actually this is in a lot of places, but if I do A, B, C, and D, check them off, I did them, then I get on a 5-point scale system, I get my 3, I get my 4, I get my 5. 3 is meets expectations, 4 is surpasses it, 5 is you greatly exceeded expectations. So now what I do instead is outcomes. If these outcomes occur, that is a definition of a 3. If these other outcomes occur, that's a definition of 4. If these other outcomes occur, that's a definition of 5. So what happens is when we check in each week, it's not about what you did, it's trying to see, can we be committed to the objective, but agile with respect to our tasks, our activities, our jobs, so that if those are not leading to those objectives, we're going to change. We're going to iterate to make sure we're doing the thing that's going to lead to those objectives. And it just changes. It's all about incentives. It just changes the incentives. So that's one really pivotal thing we've done.
That's great, Victor. Some great questions coming in already, and some of these are sort of anticipating some of the things that we wanted to explore. One of them is, how do you incentivize CX transformation or even CX in the C-suite when a service or a program is a de facto monopoly? And I think you just touched on this, Victor, through realignment of incentives. I think there's another piece there related to the mission orientation. Ultimately, we want to provide good services to the public. So let's move on to the next theme. What are some of the most impactful strategies you've employed to build trust with the public in your own practices, and how did you measure and sustain the impact? Abna?
All right, same order. So for us at USD FPAC, we have, as I mentioned, our 2 high impact service providers, Natural Resource Conservation Service, NRCS, and Farm Service Agency, FSA. And the work that my organization does, we do it in partnership with them as they serve the public. One of the things that we've done as a group that touches the public directly, the farmers and producers out there, forest managers, is we put out in 2020 a farmer survey. And it happened to come out during the beginnings of the pandemic. It wasn't obviously planned that way. None of us knew this was going to be heading towards us. But we were collecting this data from the farmers around that time. And I believe it actually went a long way to building trust with the public because on obviously, if you're working in the government, you understand that it takes a long time before you get to a thing that the public actually sees. But fortuitously, if I might use that word, it came out at the time where all of us, especially farmers, were really looking for ways to communicate with the government about what was happening for them and the struggles and challenges they were experiencing. And so we were able to leverage this tool, and it was the first time we'd done a farmer survey that went directly to the public. We were able to leverage the information as a way of showing, one, that we're interested generally in how you feel about the service we're providing. Also to then turn around and use that information as we were building programs really quickly to serve the farmers. And we've not done that survey again since then, but we did more recently do a survey that went out to prospective customers. So these are farmers who do not engage with USDA at all, and they're still farmers. You don't have to be engaging with USDA to be a farmer. But we reached out and asked questions about why they don't engage with us. And I think the fact that we put out a survey in 2020 that went out to our actual customers, and now we put out a survey that went out to non-customers, we are sending a message that we care about who you are, what your needs are, how we serve you, whether you engage with us directly or not. Because we have formalized ways in the government of gathering information, but those systems are really antiquated. And there's some people who don't even understand what a federal register is and what the process is. And then I mail something in. Who uses mail? No offense. All right. I mean, it's just such an antiquated system. And this is a way of sending the message that we are modernizing in terms of if you can go, to Amazon or whoever and give them immediate feedback about a service that you engage with them. Now people expect to be able to do that regularly. So what we're doing is sending a message that we are modernizing the way in which we engage with our constituents, and we want to get your feedback. And when we get that feedback, we're going to do something with it. Now, are we going to turn around and a month later change a program? No, we're not going to do that because that's not how government works. But what we're saying is that we're moving toward a model where you can expect us to have survey links on our websites. You can expect, even if you're a farmer and you don't have maybe good internet where you live, that we will reach out to you via paper, because we did do some of these surveys via paper, because we want to know how you feel. We want to know how to best serve you. And to me, that's a way of building trust with others, right? To be able to say, I want to hear what you think. I want to understand what your challenges are, and I'm going to take that information and do something with it. I'll bite slowly, and I'll keep coming back, and I'm going to keep asking you because your needs and your challenges are going to change over time.
Thanks, Abna. There's a closely related question from the room, which is how is CX success measured within each of your organizations? We all know in the commercial world, it's things like the NPS, the Net Promoter Score. Are there any analogous measures that you're implementing in your own groups? Go ahead.
So for us, we, of course, we're collecting data on a quarterly basis, which we report to OMB because we have to. But what we're also doing internally is we're tracking how many survey respondents are we getting over time. So initially, I think we were supposed to get about 100 responses a quarter, and I'll be honest, it was a struggle to even get that. And so one of the internal measures that we're using is, are more people starting to give us feedback? So not even are they giving us "you are awesome" feedback, but are they just communicating with us? Because the fact, when you see more and more people, more and more farmers communicating with us regularly through all of the different spaces that we're collecting feedback, to us, that's an internal measure that says people get that we're listening, and so they're now talking to us more. So that's one of the...
Fantastic.
We still use a lot of mail now. We have
Thank you.
loads of paper that people have it electronic shape, they print it, they send it, and we actually convert it back to electronic shape by scanning them. So hopefully one day we don't have to do that anymore. But for us, right, like in Motor Carrier Safety Administration, our primary mission or even the need for our existence is to reduce and minimize the crashes and fatalities that are involved with large trucks and buses, right? Again, there is no metric on how many lives is okay to be lost, right? Our goal is to get to zero deaths. So a part of that is achieved through technological evolution, right? We have almost like 15,000 inspectors that spot trucks as they're moving and pull them aside onto those weigh stations that you see along the highway or actually on the highways itself. They actually inspect the trucks, they validate the driver, whether that driver is allowed to operate that vehicle. Is he within the guidelines of the hours of service rules, or do they have like their most recent medical checkup done, which there are lots of things, drugs and alcohol, clearinghouse checks that they need to pass, and a bunch of those things. So when the technology is disintegrated and the experience of these customers or users in that action is cumbersome, there is a lot of human errors bound to happen, right? You're supposed to check 18 things, and I have to go like 40 different places to do those 18 checks, then I'm gonna, either choose to miss one or by accident I miss one, and we let a truck that's not supposed to be on the road or a driver that's not supposed to be driving a bad truck. And that's how usually these accidents happen. And when the truck at that speed hits something, it's painful, it's bad. So what we are doing is, as part of our entire IT modernization, we're looking at personas of, okay, we have various individuals that interact with our agency. The customers could be a commercial driver that wants to drive, or a trucking organization, or a common citizen like us that may want to open a trucking business going forward, or the doctors that we have certified to certify those drivers across the country. There are a bunch of safety advocates and organizations that are relying on the data that we produce as well, right? So the trust happens when that experience is what is expected. If I go to a hospital and as I walk in and I'm checking in, if I have a bad feeling, then I don't actually know if I actually can trust the doctor there and have a peaceful visit, right? It's always going to be there of the entire journey. We used to actually call this in retail, my retail world, is the experience of the shopper throughout the journey in the store is one sector, and their experience while they pay and walk out is a different. As the person in charge of the store systems, especially the POS, you got to be able to do transactions like that. You can't have like 5-minute, screen loading while the payment goes through. That's like, okay, did I pay once or twice or 5 times? That people walk out with that in mind, they're never coming back to that store. Same thing here too, right? Like, when we're giving information or giving people onboarding the trucking organization, if that experience is not peaceful to the mind, they don't trust that their data was secure enough, right? So we deal with a lot of that data. And we actually had a scenario where we have a national consumer complaint database, and majority of those complaints in that database are about the system of that complaints database itself. So that's not a good place to be in either, right? So what we have built from a strategy perspective is trying to identify the personas and what their journey is. In that journey of their interactions with us, what data they need from us, what data they are producing for us, and what data they may consume or somebody else that will consume that that has been produced in that transaction. So creating these personas has helped us identify modernizing of our entire technology stack. We have a lofty goal of modernizing all the 60 plus applications by 2026. We started that in 2022, so in 4 years. So with that lofty goal, rather than replacing system by system and upgrading it, we are actually doing a platform product-centric approach to get to that customer-centric approach. So we are looking at products and how each product will talk to each other and give that customer experience. That's the strategy we have applied, and it's working out well for us. The way we are testing whether it is working or not, again, we have NPS in private world. We have employed similar concepts. We don't have an official NPS that can be published, but we have deployed similar concepts of getting to some sort of score. So we were at this satisfaction level, and next time we do that feedback gathering or survey or assessing that satisfaction score, we need to be here, if not here, right? So and in order to get there, it's not going to happen automatically, right? You have to do something when this baseline was established if your goal is to get here. So what features, what capabilities, what enhancements can be made and add value to that customer journey that will direct the score to go here. So we have a rigorous product-centric approach for our day-to-day lives. Our project managers have been thinking like what product managers in Google should think. We have engineering folks that are focusing on the engineering metrics, like how can I reduce my microservice transaction time to get the data, publish the data, etc. So there is a lot of shift that is happening, and part of that, like Mick said, attracting the next generation of talent, right? Like, again, we have good people in the government workforce, but they don't have the great technology exposure that the private industry is using today because they have not been using those in the current government roles. So we have retrained, reskilled our staff. We're attracting new talent. So we're doing a lot of those strategies as well to get to the things that we need to have in the agency before we can deliver those things.
Mm-hmm. Great perspectives, Pavan. You touched on workforce development and on portfolio management and those specific methods that you're using that quality score. So, Mick, I'm curious to hear from you, given your focus on data collection and data storytelling, have you seen anything emerge with respect to measuring CX that you feel like is unique or well adapted to government?
Well, I think, as far as measuring, not so much, sorry. Thank you, Shankar. But one thing I do see as far as, I look at storytelling more as a CX strategy, really internally. I wanted to get back to that question, not that I'm getting to your question, but the question I was asked before that came in about getting buy-in, especially from the executive level. One, I was very lucky. My boss hired me specifically for CX, right? So that battle was won right there. But storytelling is very, very important for that. What you can do is if you're running like an NPS program, you have the optional space for somebody after they do their 0 to 10. Do you have any other comments? At that point, then you can humanize, you can help develop empathy for your users, for your constituents among the executive level. And so doing that through anecdotes or whatnot. I will say this about CX in general. What appealed to me the most was the first time I looked at a journey map, and I really didn't know what I was looking at. And I started looking at it a little closer, and I started recognizing stuff from my acting experience. And that was I was looking at a script. I was looking at a story. And I was seeing a story arc. I was looking from beginning to end. And as an actor, I was looking at various points where the customer was in their journey. Where are they going? Where were they coming from? and where are they going to? And once I made that connection, I found like it was just, before then, I was trying to explain to people in the office the definition of the word "the." We all know what the word "the" is. We know how to use it, but do we really know the definition? I actually looked it up the other day, and unless you are actually a grammatical expert, you're not going to be able to rapidly come off. You're just like, well, it's just "the." That's what CX was for me. That's what have years of customer facing roles, years of developing empathy by researching characters, which by the way was a customer persona that I had no idea I had this experience, and I was like, okay, wow, this is great. Here's a story to tell. And so that's been a big part of just like I referred to the merry band that we have at work right now, was just getting people to buy in, getting economists, lawyers, people who are very, very left brain to really buy into this right brain approach. And I think that's had, I think that's helped us with our trust, building trust with the public. But at the commission, the thing, it's not a problem. Sorry, the issue really is that with the commission, what we have is we have a congressionally mandated mission to perform oversight over the postal rates and service performance of the Postal Service. That in and of itself is a trust function. So we are doing that. And just on the CX side of things, just starting the process of asking them questions in our regulatory process, informing the Postal Service like we are interested in CX, and these are going to be in reports. Not that they weren't doing it before; they actually do a very good job at CX, to be honest. But nobody was really thinking about it before. And I think there were some people at headquarters, probably, my guess, and this is just my guess, is that they were like, hey, somebody's paying attention to what we're doing. And I think they like that. That's a part of the collaborative process, the collaborative side of the regulatory process that I see, and not the adversarial one that some other people see. But at the commission ourselves, we also looked at, okay, we put out these 2 very voluminous reports every year. That's not exactly accessible to most average citizens, even though every citizen is touched by the Postal Service every day. So we just thought of just some basic things, because we are at a point right now where we're in very early days of standing up our data analytics and management. But what we did starting in 2021, so for fiscal year 20, is that we just did summaries. We put out summaries in addition to the reports. So if somebody doesn't have the time to read through a 300-page report, shocking, I know, they can actually look at a summary page and see just kind of the 10 highlights, just highlights that we picked. We thought, hey, you know what, this is what touches on most people's lives. Another thing was coming up with, we included a link to the Postal Service's service dashboard, so they can go directly to, with this link to, and then type in their zip code and find out, okay, how's my mail performance in my zip code? This goes all the way down to Aunt Minnie, who wants to make sure her nephew gets his birthday card on time. And so, yeah, and it's a small thing, but I think it has had significant effect on building that trust. We're not just putting out, by the way, which is a great report. They're all great reports, and that's not to denigrate that by any means. Please understand that's not what I'm saying. But to make it just make a quick source reference that maybe then says, hey, you know what? There's some interesting stuff in that report. Let me go in there. Let me dig a little bit further. That, I guarantee you, has happened. So, and that's been fun to kind of work on that too. When I say it's fun, it's really cool to apply all this like right brain creative stuff that I had worked on for so long and actually see a purpose for it in the government. That excites me. Yeah. And that is just, my father was like 30 years in the government. He was a Marine, a firefighter, retired as an administrative law judge. He gave most of his professional life to this country and God, I'm sorry, I get a little choked up. But I just think of even just having these last 4 years to be able to do that and have the little small part, that gets back to the employee experience I was mentioning before. If you can give everybody that feeling a little bit, and like you were saying, that's when you talk about a democracy, when you talk about areas where democracies flourish, I don't know, I think that's the ballgame there.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Victor, I'm really curious to hear your perspective on this question. And there was a follow-up question that came in from the room related to your discussion of outcome-based performance. So this is somewhat related to strategies to build trust, right? You're starting from the organization and working outward to improve service delivery. So we'd love to hear your thoughts.
Sorry, and apologies, I've lost the train of the question because it's not the one that's on the screen. What was the original question that someone?
The question are, what are the most impactful strategies you've employed to build trust with the public, and how did you measure and sustain the impact? And then there was a follow-up question regarding specific CX measurement strategies.
Yeah, that's like 4 questions.
Good luck.
Yeah, let me try to move quickly. Most impactful thing that we've done, and I'm new at the CDC, so my last agency was NASA. None of the comments I say today are representative of either of those organizations. The most impactful thing we've done is to use a participatory process. So at NASA, I had a participatory employee team, so employees whose job was not customer experience or employee experience, and they were working to improve their own employee experience. They had a participatory customer team, people who are working to improve their own customer experience. So what we're doing in a sense is saying, hey, the only knowledge that is important is not mainstream institutional knowledge of customer experience, what I get from a boot camp or a course or a degree program, et cetera. But we also want the lived experiential knowledge, the embodied knowledge, the relational, community, energetic, aesthetic, intuitive knowledge of the community of the people and having that drive. So that's the most impactful thing. How did you measure and sustain the impact? The question of measurement is a tough one because there isn't one way we measure. So if you look across the service journey, I'm going to continue with the NASA example, we measure different things at different points, right? So Mick mentioned a journey map. So we'll take a journey map and we'll ask ourselves, we do this workshop, hey, what parts of the journey do we want to measure? So we'll say, well, we want to measure this first point of awareness and this point when they submit a proposal. We had a service where we provided financial and technical assistance to small businesses and research institutions who had a technology that needed a little more help in the hopes that it would transition to a private or public investor with the ultimate goal of commercialization or infusion into a government project. So getting onto a NASA mission to Mars or something, it would be infusion, but commercialization, the private investor then gets it on the shelves or online to purchase. So yeah, I mean, sometimes we were measuring, hey, what was your satisfaction when you called the help desk? Sometimes we were measuring, how long does it take you to submit a proposal? Sometimes we were measuring the number of times that you committed an error. Sometimes we measured were you a repeat customer? Did you come back and reapply for funding? There's different things we measure, and it depends on the touch point. We have webinars and trainings and conferences that we ran and conferences where we spoke or did an exhibition booth. You could call us, you could email us, you could do the help desk, you could use our software platform. There's all these different interactions, some online, offline, and we measure vastly different things across it, both qualitative and quantitative. But the short way to kind of sum it up is this. We created 3 metrics. How do I say this in a succinct way? What my experience is that executives often, and this is not only true for executives, but people get overwhelmed by these amazing dashboards with all the wheels and the flashing lights and the spinning buttons. So we said, how can we simplify it to help them make decisions? So just 3 numbers and that's it. A CX score from 0 to 10, an EX score, employee experience from 0 to 10, and SI stands for service index. It's a measure of the health and performance of the service. Just 3 numbers. So what happens? An executive looks at it. Okay, service index is 9.5, employee experience is 9.2, customer experience is 2.5. Why is that? So what they could do is click it, it disaggregates. Oh, this part of the customer experience is 8.9, this part is 9.2, but this part over here is 3.3. Oh, why is that? Click it, it disaggregates. okay, women-owned small businesses are having this component, indigenous-owned, black-owned, Latinx-owned, et cetera. And then they could create a strategy. Okay, for the next 6 months or a year, we're going to focus on improving women-owned small business experience of this component of the journey, and that'll improve the overall experience score for that part of the journey, and that'll improve the overall customer. It gives a kind of strategy-making process to help them focus to kind of get there. So we have those 3 scores, and the last thing I'll say is, well, why don't you just and only measure customer experience? And there are examples, we might have heard some, where customer experience is aligned to service outcomes. But there are many examples where I can provide an amazing customer experience, but you don't achieve your goals. I can provide a great customer experience in the example that I give, giving technical and financial assistance, but they don't ever reach commercialization. They don't ever get their technology infused. So we have to also measure performance outcomes, whatever that is. I can design a beautiful learning experience, and the students can say, yeah, I had an amazing time, this is a great, but they didn't learn much. I could also have this experience where students learned so much, it was so hard, and they give us a low score. It was so much work, it was so difficult, but they learned a lot. They're not always aligned, so we have to actually measure the outcomes that this thing is supposed to be doing, in addition to the customer experience, in addition to the employee experience, because all 3 affect each other.
It's an excellent perspective, Victor. Thank you so much. Unfortunately, we are about out of time here, and it's time for lunch. I know you all are probably anxious to get some food, so I'd like to give my panelists just 30 seconds, just wrap up really quickly. Abna?
Thank you. It's been a pleasure to be here with you all today. I continue to be very excited about the fact that CX in government is a conversation that we're building on all the time, and we're learning lessons. I know I just learned something from Victor as he was talking, and I'm very excited about the ways that internally and externally we're pushing the dial with CX. So thank you for having me.
Same here. Pleasure to be here. And like you, Abna, I learned from all of the panel members something today. I think customer experience, it's a journey. It's not one time, you provide it and be done. You got to know your customer, continue to adapt, to learn more about your customer as they change. They have changed. So again, it's a continuous thing. It's a journey. Keep developing that customer experiences and strategies around how to do them. What worked in one area may not work in the other area, so be cautious. Fail quickly, right? Again, I think that's what I keep telling myself. Fail quickly and minimize the blast radius. Those are 2 most important things I live by.
Thanks, Pablo.
Thank you.
Okay. I also want to thank everybody for being here, and also the fact that you're here. I also want to thank you for taking an interest in CX, especially in the public sector. There's something you just said about failure. I also kind of think of, actually, you know what? No, I remember, about failure. I thought about it earlier. It's, I was looking at just like Postal's, performance, and certain things are up or down year to year. And the thing is, it's like when they're down, it's not failure. It's just, you just learned what doesn't work and what can work better. And I think that's kind of the thing to look at. We're not measuring our failures. We're measuring where we can do better and how we can do better. So, thank you.
Excellent. Thanks, Mick.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been great. I would just say there are multiple executive orders on equity, and we have one on transforming the customer experience. I would encourage everyone to try to measure those together instead of separate. Learn to infuse equity into your customer experience metrics.
Absolutely. Thanks, Victor. Thanks so much, everyone. Hope you enjoyed it.